Welcome, fellow time travelers, to the disoriented and kaleidoscopic world of the late 60s and 70s. You've made it to chapter 3 of the history of surrealist cinema, and things are about to get a lot weirder. In our previous chapters, we spoke with the measured tone of scholars, to some extent. But now the era itself demands a looser, more chaotic rhythm. Think of it as a drop into the mind journey, you know? The footage blurs, the music warps, and reality feels a little more stretchy. Yes, our tone is going to shift as well. Imagine a smoke-filled theater where the screen is cracking and melting. And no, let's not think of Dali anymore, though he is a big influence in everything that comes after him, but let's not think of Dali anymore. Let's think of something different. We're trading our sober trench coats for tie-dye t-shirts. So buckle up, because this chapter will be disoriented, playful, poetic, and dreamlike. Even more dreamlike than the ones before. In other words, it's going to feel a little tripping and on acid, because that's the whole era. So let's dive in. The cultural upheaval of the 1960s and 70s. The world outside the theater was in revolt. Students were protesting, and anti-war marches and civil rights campaigns filled the city streets. This counterculture was anti-establishment, a generational rebellion against authority and tradition, and hippies championed free love and the sexual revolution, women's liberation, drugs, and spiritual exploration as well. In Haight-Ashbury and beyond, up to 100,000 young people gathered for the Summer of Love, 1967, espousing anti-materialism, free love, spiritual enlightenment, and hallucinogenic drug usage. LSD use soared at that time, really. Famously, Ken Casey's merry pranksters roamed the country in their bus, handing out acid at psychedelic parties, making LSD a symbol of the era's open-minded experimentation. The Gulf War and draft and political unrest with anti-Vietnam protests fueled impatience with hierarchy. There was generational gap. Youth rebellion insisted on personal freedom and questioned the system. Drug culture emerged openly. LSD, cannabis, psychedelics became widespread experiments. Sexual liberation surged, contraception, erotic cinema, and feminism upset old norms. A spiritual awakening took hold. Many sought meaning through Eastern mysticism rather than religion, meditation, or simply the next psychedelic experience. You know what I mean. The result was a total aesthetic shift. Fashion, art, and especially film became more boundary-breaking. As one writer notes, this period shifts the aesthetic and consciousness of youth culture, from politics and music to design and film. In practical terms, censorship relaxed in some cases, and Hollywood's old studio systems were crumbling. Filmmakers now had a blank canvas and fewer rules, which just meant freedom, In this charged climate, surrealism found new life, bigger life, and it was no longer confined to obscure galleries. Surreal imaginary exploded onto screens, big and small, thanks to that freewheeling spirit. This scene is set. The world is restless, dreamily rebellious, and film is ready to reflect that feeling and that inner combustion. And directors who once tiptoed around taboo ideas began to sprint. LSD, marijuana, and a fascination with the unconscious, though it was before then too, but it was even more pronounced now, spilled onto film reels and visuals. Swirling colors, strange symbolism, and kaleidoscopic edits that mimicked a trip. The line between reality and hallucination blurred completely, and just so much more than before. Key movements? Well, Counterculture, youth rebellion plus civil rights plus anti-war plus sexual revolution plus Eastern mysticism meant fertile ground for avant-garde cinema. Why surrealism returned and how psychedelia meets cinema. The story goes that by the late 60s, the artistic underground now sprinkled into the mainstream, which is great. That's a great thing. And it was experimenting like never before, which is also great. Filmmakers and audiences alike were hungry for sensory overload. Psychedelic art, such as posters, paintings, comics, albums, had been swirling through clubs and concerts for years, featuring highly distorted and surreal visuals, bright colors and full spectrums that were meant to evoke an LSD-like mind state. No surprise then the cinema followed that. Directors could now literally paint the screen, so image, eardrum dumping, montages, neon dreamscape and kaleidoscopic scenes cut in those rhythms, it's very interesting. Unlike the polished surrealism of the 1920s, this psychedelia was more raw, more bold, and more sensory. Filmmakers were inspired by not just surrealist painters, but by actual drug experiences and also mind expansions. In that liberty, even Hollywood films grew more radical in content and style than in previous decades, which notes Harvard's archive of psychedelic cinema. The studio system was breaking down, indie productions were thriving, and directors like Dennis Hopper or Ken Russell were pushing boundaries as never before. It was as if cinema became a trip by itself. Shots would morph seamlessly and time would collapse and images would loop and storylines often melted away in favor of pure feeling of ecstasy. Alejandro Jodorowsky, El Topo, or The Holy Mountain. One of the wildest visionaries of the era was Alejandro Jodorowsky, a Chilean filmmaker turned Mexican cold hero. He made the term acid western a thing. His breakthrough was El Topo, 1970, a black-clad gunfighter's surreal pilgrimage through the desert. Wikipedia calls it a Mexican acid western. Okay. A new term, by the way, with bizarre characters and occurrences, heavy doses of Judeo-Christian symbolism and Eastern philosophy. El Topo is packed with violence, mysticism, even a crazy gunfight with monks, and a finale of bizarre enlightenment. It wasn't your typical Western movie, not at all. Not at all. It was sort of like seeing a Dali painting in slow motion. It became underground cult, and even John Lennon loved it, and made Jodorowsky a legend. After El Topo, Jodorowsky made The Holy Mountain in 1973. This one goes full manic kaleidoscope. Britannica bluntly defines The Holy Mountain as a 1973 Mexican surrealist film. And wow, surreal it was. A movie about Christ. Okay, let's first start there. A movie about Christ and tarot cards and tarot-obsessed alchemists climbing an actual holy mountain, with every shot dripping occult symbolism. The Beatles manager funded it, okay? And Lennon and Yoko helped back it, because yes, the fabulous Beatles were into this too. Jodorowsky's camera adored triangles, eye sockets, and freaky rituals, and rainbow towers. He was a visionary. It's a mystic fever dream. Imagine tarot cards coming to life, monsters partying in bars and shapes, telling a story about transformation and power. The film has almost no dialogue, but instead it bombards you with crazy images. Picture this. At the top of the holy mountain, a naked golden Jodorowsky is standing under a flag of zero. It's like Dali directing a carnival. You know what I mean? American underground director Kenneth Anger was another key figure, definitely. He was unapologetically pagan, raw, and sensational. In Scorpio Rising in 1963, he turned a short into a wild music video. It's 28 minutes of bikers, leather jackets, and pop songs. Anger shots it in New York over months, layering it with a soundtrack of 60s pop hits, Ricky Nelson, Peggy March, etc. Loosely structured around a prominent soundtrack of 1960s pop music, Wikipedia explains. Scorpio Rising follows a group of bikers preparing for a night out. Anger lit the film in hypercharged colors and weird shadows, and the effect is like watching kids play with motorcycles while Hector Berlioz screams in the speakers. It's campy, it's erotic, and it's a bit creepy. It even caused lawsuits for obscenity in its day. Critics say it basically invented the modern music video. The symbolism is heavy. Badges of Nazis and Christ all twist together on those bikes, all to the tune of He's a Rebel and My Boyfriend's Back. The film's energy is explosive and absolutely contagious, literally jumping off the screen. Then there's Anger's inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, 1954, which is basically like earlier than the movies that I'm going to be mentioning in this video, but it's more into this section than that last video. It's an almost hour-long psychedelic occult pageantry, if that makes sense. A drag queen Apollo rides a giant jack-o'-lantern. Yes, buck-naked people with painted faces frantically move. Eyes are drawn on everyone. Themes are pure Crowley. Think witches, devils, music boxes, tarot, and sex taboo demon worship. It's pure dream logic chaos on crack, with image smashing image in a trance-like fashion. The Pleasure Dome doesn't explain itself, as most surrealist pieces don't. It just is. It just exists. A fevered spiritual ritual captured in film. Federico Fellini, 8.5 and Juliet of the Spirits. Across the ocean in Italy, Federico Fellini was already melding dreams and reality in his work. By 1963, he made 8.5, which is his most... That's an incredible famous movie. His famous reflection on a filmmaker's creative block. Shot in stark black and white, 8.5 follows Guido as he shifts between day-to-day chaos and fantasy sequences. The film uses surrealist interludes, Guido's imaginations and dreams, to heighten the story, as Wikipedia explains. Fellini also uses surrealist passages to increase the film's fantastical atmosphere. Guido in spas, on dance floors, fleeing reporters in fantasy. It's witty, it's introspective, and it's always a little uncanny, as most surrealist cinema is. 8.5 proved you could take psychological film and drop a few hallucinatory bombs in it. 2 years later, Fellini went full color with Juliet of the Spirits in 1965, his first film in technicolor. And boy was it in technicolor. It is all swirling pastels and loud neons. Literally a technicolor trip. Juliet of the Spirits is the story of a bored housewife who starts seeing ghosts and dreams after suspecting her husband's infidelity. Critics call it a Fellini trip. Dreams and fantasies, the more baroque, the more colorful, the better. It intrudes into reality to explore the protagonist's mind. Fellini even admitted that he took LSD in a clinical setting for inspiration. But then he also said that it was disappointing, but the effects on the film were undeniable. As one commentator writes, in Juliet, he lets the colors fly wild. The more hallucinatory the scene, the more saturated the palette. White houses explode into red and purple parties. Nuns dance with jugglers. Giant saints burst out of walls. It's like a surreal living painting. A topless flying woman, witches stirring pots. Juliet's inner life is a carnival. By the end, reality and fantasy completely merge and blend. Fellini proved that European art houses could also go outlandish on acid without losing its soul. Now, it wasn't only men behind these experimental cameras. Female voices in surreal and psychedelic cinema. They were also very loud. Voices of defiance included bold female directors and artists. Věra Chytilová's Daisies in 1966 is a dazzling example, a landmark of the Czech New Wave. Daisies follows two young women, both named Maria, who carry out a string of bizarre anarchic art pranks. And the film itself follows no normal linear plot, which is surrealist. Chytilová wanted to satirize bourgeois values by having two teenage girls gleefully destroy everything in sight, from food to romance. The film is often called a surrealist feminist romp. It subverts traditional gender stereotypes, redefining its heroines on their own terms, and was viewed as a satire of socialist society. The cinematography is frantic and playful. Split scenes, wobbly angles, sudden cartoonish edits, hand-colored bits as well. Daisies burst with wit and eye-opening, eye-popping color. Cut-out paper flowers were literally blooming on screen. Though the visuals are mystical and whimsical, feathers, confetti, roots, the tone swings crazy and funny. Censors even banned it for a while. But its radical style epitomized the era's feel. Joyful anarchy and rebellion reflected in every frame. Another pioneering voice was Shirley Clarke. She directed Portrait of Jason in 1967, an experimental documentary. It's just one room and one man, okay? Jason Holiday, a charismatic, gay, African-American hustler. He talked into the camera for 12 hours straight. Clarke used avant-garde and cinema verite techniques to let Jason unravel. In her words, she wanted all the behind-the-scenes interactions included in the final cut. The result is spellbinding and genuinely uncanny. Jason performs and jokes, but the film peels the layers of his personality until you see something raw about exploitation, performance, and identity. It's not psychedelic in color, but it's psychedelic in intensity and unreality. The boundaries between actor and subject, reality and act, they're always shifting there. It's a brave counterpoint to the male visions of that time, a daring exploration of personality as a surreal stage. The rise of psychedelic aesthetics. What tied these films together was a shared aesthetic. Think saturated color, squirming patterns, and vision quest imaginary. Early psychedelic art in any medium was marked by what is described as fantastic, metaphysical, and surrealist subject matter, coupled with kaleidoscopic patterns and vivid, sometimes clashing colors. On screen, this meant scenes full of spirals, starbursts, and weird symbols. Filmmakers overlapped shots, rewound footage, or painting the film stock. Editing could mimic hallucinations. For example, JFK's assassination films were slapped with color filters and echoing audio in 1960s parodies. The overall pace often slowed or floated as if it was a dream. Some directors even used early computer effects or hand-drawn animations to create endless morphing shapes. The spiritual symbolism was obvious too. Mandalas, tarot cards, Buddha statues, mystical chants in the soundtrack. The music would swell, a flute would trill, and suddenly the story would dissolve into an eye of an iris spinning into infinity. A concrete example, mind the yellow, red, green, black color scheme in Spectre's nightclub scene in Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain. It was meant to induce disorientation, like riding inside a kaleidoscope. Or think of the neon sugar pill colors in Chytilová's Daisies, pink pretzel pig, which were so bold they nearly seemed to jump out of the screen. Even the grain and flicker of film stock was embraced. In short, everything was turned up to 11. When someone later wrote that psychedelic art features highly distorted or surreal visuals, bright colors and full spectrums, kaleidoscopically swirling patterns to evoke a drug experience. They could have been quoting any of these movie moments, and they could have been right. Now, surrealism meets rock and pop culture. This era's psychedelic surge reached into mainstream media and pop culture too, even though it's not exactly film, but I think that it's really interesting to mention it, so I will mention it. Filmmakers and rock stars loved surrealism and loved to collab. The Beatles, for instance, threw themselves into it completely. They made Magical Mystery Tour in 1967, a half-hour TV special that's like a surreal roadside trip movie starring Paul, John, George, and Ringo. It's a mishmash of bizarre sketches and musical numbers. The Beatles themselves improvised a coach tour of Liverpool to Blackpool, picking up kaleidoscopic dancers, giving out magic. The script was handwritten and loosely sketched out. Real hippie improvisation, for sure. In fact, Wikipedia notes was inspired by Ken Casey's further adventures with the Merry Pranksters, those LSD pioneers, of course. So Magical Mystery Tour shows the band in flower patterned suits blowing kisses to the camera, then performing I Am the Walrus, okay, wearing animal masks. Very trippy, very on brand, very surrealist. Elsewhere, Beatles animation took psychedelia to cartoonland with Yellow Submarine in 1968. In that film, psychedelic pop art literally comes alive. The bad guys, blue meanies, are color-draining boogeymen in a candy-colored world. Their triumphant songs are sung by animated Beatles with swirling kimonos and walking collages of shapes. The style is pure dreamlike fantasy. Kaleidoscope backgrounds, fish swimming through litmus paper skies, and even John Lennon's glasses smearing away at one point to reveal another world behind. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't just the Beatles. Pink Floyd and other rock bands fostered a visual revolution as well. Consider Live at Pompeii, 1972. The progressive rock band filmed a concert in an ancient amphitheater amid erupting volcano footage. The band's jam sessions are side by side with silent statues and shots of magma, creating a ritualistic, otherworldly vibe. Or Roger Waters' The Wall animations, mid-70s, with marching hammers and hallucinatory pigeons. I love pigeons, for whatever reason, so I like this. Rock concerts themselves became multimedia shows with kaleidoscope projectors and strobe lights. In sum, music and films were intertwined tightly and closely in the counterculture. Movies absorbed the psychedelia of rock, posters, and light shows, and vice versa, creating a feedback of loop and surreal imaginary. The decline of the dream, commercialization, and the burnout. Alas, all great things and trips must end. By the early 1970s, the psychedelic dream was already fading. It was a short time for it, but it was strong. The peace and love ideal has been partly overrun by commerce and the burnout. As one retrospective knows, by fall 1967, the Haight-Ashbury scene has ended with a mock death of hippie funeral, a pointed jab at how the once idealistic culture and movement had become now commercialized hippie culture. The Stanford hitchhikers dwindled to just a handful of hardcore hippies. Then the government stepped in. By 1970s, LSD was declared a Schedule I illicit drug. Suddenly the party was over legally as well. Underground figures scattered or were arrested. With the drug references outlawed, mainstream filmmakers became wary, so the new Hollywood had peaked. Auteur cinema gave way to blockbusters or gritty realism. The vibrant palette turned browner and faded. Some directors moved on to other obsessions. Antonioni made Zabriskie Point, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, 1970, about the absurdity of the counterculture. Altman made Three Women, 1977, which was an exploring hallucinatory female psychodrama, but such projects were rare exceptions. In truth, the idealism of that revolution kind of tired out. The 1960s kids who'd believe in utopia were now seeing cynicism and exhaustion. Even the term psychedelic lost its innocence as corporate brands tried to cash in on kaleidoscope fashions. By the late 70s, disco and punk had largely emerged and replaced acid rock as youth culture. In film, you saw fewer literal trips. Instead, the mainstream went either sentimental, like Disney doing Alice in Wonderland, or heading into crime and horror. That closing of the chapter was inevitable. As Harvard's film program concludes, psychedelic cinema served as a window of introspection for a moment in time. But once those windows were shattered, the movement slowly dissolved. It wasn't the end of visionaries though, but the fewer broke. For example, by the 70s we already got the first David Lynch piece, Eraserhead. But I'll talk about that later in another chapter because I want to delve deeper into David Lynch's work. The grand party was over. It was replaced by hangovers, new genres, and a more jaded film sensibility. Yet the influence remains. Today, even indie films or music videos still have that vibe of the acid kaleidoscopic experiments, and modern directors will sometimes explicitly reference Daisies or the Pleasure Dome. The dream did fade, but it left stains that cinema still picks on at today. That's the end of chapter 3 of our history of the surrealist cinema. From the wild free love carnival to that revived surrealism, through the decadent visions of Jodorowsky and Fellini, the campy rituals of Anger, and the bold colors of feminine cinema, to the blackout of late 70s reality. You've seen how political unrest, sexual liberation, and the literal trip of drugs pumped new life into surrealist cinema. We've traced how these films embraced rich symbolism, saturated color, and non-linear storytelling, almost as if the movies were dreaming themselves. In the next chapter, we'll watch how the movement continues, possibly through some home video and new technologies that carry surrealism forward in unexpected ways. But for now, we step out of the acid dream and keep our third eye open, maybe? Because reality might already be slipping back into black and white. Okay, that's all from me today, and I hope you enjoyed this video because I truly did. So if you did, give me a like, follow, anything that you want to. And if you want to follow me anywhere else, my Instagram is the same as my YouTube channel. I have a Spotify podcast called Whatever Happens. And yeah, you can check out my channel for some more videos. And that's everything that I can give you, basically. You can check out my letterboxd if you care to. I think it's in my bio too. So yeah, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!